Scorpio is fixed water. Scorpio I see in a fixed body of water that is not running, like a pool or a lake, as opposed to a river, which I see as Pisces, and the ocean, which would be Cancer. These are ways of visualizing the water signs. So Scorpio would be the creepy little pond in the middle of the woods that legend says that there's something in there that will pull you in if you look in too deep. Kind of like the story of Narcissus, where he looked at his own reflection so much that he got sucked into it, or his reflection stole his body and he disappeared into some underworld. So the underworld, that's something to consider when you're contacting scorpionic energy. The underworld, the reason this all makes sense is Scorpio being ruled by Pluto, which is the planet of transformation and destruction for the sake of transformation in traditional astrology. Scorpio rules all these things. Scorpio is a master of manipulation, of disguises, of channeling through the unknown depths of the psyche. Very 12th house energy, which deals with all of these significant transformations of your life, dealing with death and moving through death and understanding it for yourself. And the more strange and maybe a little bit creepy, freaky areas of your mind, so the unconsciousness, the subconscious, all of these things Scorpio rules over. Pluto is the planetary ruler. Scorpio is fixed water, placing it across the zodiac from Leo, which would be the masculine other. So Scorpio is a female sign, being a water sign, which means that the mode of Scorpio is female and feminine and yielding and receptive, as opposed to projecting outwards, confronting head on. The female MO is going to be more passive. It's going to be more hidden. It'd be like the difference between poisoning and straight on assassinating, via a sword, or straight on assassinating with an immediate violence. They would be more likely to poison you with a sickness, to induce sickness, poisoning, all of these things. There's a reason why, witch is a term. The witch poisons. The witch knows all the tinctures and the rest of the tincture recipes. The witch knows all the plants which could put an enemy to sleep. The witch has a cauldron. So all of these things have to do with being very well versed in alchemy, or in the working of poison and herbal medicine, and making things happen using things you have found growing in the earth, using liquids you have found in trees, special trees, or distilled using roots and berries that you didn't, that were for some reason calling to you, but did not want to be eaten, did not strike you as something that you ought to eat. But still, since you wish to preserve the land and what is natural, endemic to the land, opting to do a little bit research, using the knowledge that is common knowledge, using what you have been learned, what you have been passed on to from your ancestors and other wise people that you have known. It all has to do with coming to some kind of agreement with not only the land, but with the tools that are well known and have been passed down in history. And the closer it is to the earth, the more grounded it is. The closer it is to the earth, the more reachable it is, not only by you, but also as something you may pass on to future generations or other villages, peoples, because they will too have the materials needed already. They'll have the tools needed already that will be able to they'll be able to use to make these extractions for themselves and be able to make something medicinal using tools that they already have, and not some extremely new, extremely unreliable new technology that is not intended to be passed down for many, 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 many generations. Some tool that has been fashioned together for an extremely specific purpose and will serve 1% of the population as opposed to 15 to 20% of the population, or 10% of the population. There are magnitudes of use to anything that has been fashioned together or invented. So that is important. That is important to consider in terms of the roots of medicine. What is still true now that was true 1,000 years ago or hundreds of years ago? What happens when the means of production become increasingly disparate? What happens when the product requires increasing amounts of parts that are very difficult to fashion or very expensive to fashion? So now you have a product that it might look kind of cool or do some kind of really neat trick, but it is 100% made of parts that are hard to find and put together by some machine that is hard to acquire. Now you have something that is extremely selected and not useful at all to the common people. You have something that is extremely fashioned and too fashioned to be reproduced easily and by people who don't have gigantic tons of money, at their disposal. Quite possibly money that has been stolen. So what does that do? That removes the commoner. That removes the commoner and makes the medicine world the world for the rich. That makes the medicine world only available to the richest people, the richest, most upper crust of the planet, of the social stratification, which is miles deep. Have you seen how deep they can go into the earth and what they can get from the earth? That isn't just oil, by the way. There are layers and layers to it. There are all kinds of, natural resources, but there are not that many kinds of usable products that are usable to the common person, the member of the masses, who is not willing to sell their entire being to making some extremely rare, extremely stratified product. So that's why the bowl, the basic bowl, iron bowl, is so useful for this sign and for medicine in general. You think of a bowl, not some extremely rare chemistry lab equipment that would not be fungible to fund in your own house. The idea of folk magic, then, the idea of folk medicine, home remedies, becomes more powerful once you start to need more medicine for whatever reason, and you are finding that there's a whole lot of guesswork involved in the passing of medicine to you, from the richest upper crust, the most well-funded upper crust. And by well-funded, I mean funded by companies that have just started out, but they do have a lot of money due to having come through all sorts of loopholes, legal loopholes, and making products that are not intended to last a long time, that are not intended to last for generations. And that's why you learn about planned obsolescence. You've learned this term. Probably have learned this term by now. It got very big in the last century, producing products ever since factory work for making products. So that's the mid 1900s. They started planning out for the demise of the products. They started planning out the end of this thing that they've designed. So they're designing it in order to have a control over its use, and they're designing it with flaws that are significant and purposefully significant, so that you will have to trash them and buy new ones over again. So that doesn't follow for recipes that are old as dirt. That doesn't follow. The folk tools create no waste. The folk tools can be handed down to the next generation and can be learned to use fairly simply and without letting go of whatever language you started out using, or you wouldn't require annihilating your connection to the place you came from, because this tool was created for the use of humans, and it will stay that way since it is replicatable and understandable to a human mind. So that's the roots of folk magic, and that's how it stays common. That's how it stays close to the people. All the power to all of the people.